Hey everybody, my name is Frank. This is the PothOnProgramming video log, and we're back with part 4, part 4 of the Stay Down devlog. And I realized recently that a big problem I have is project structure, and I decided that I want to structure this project a little bit better. Probably not the best possible way I could, because I think the best possible way I could at this point in time is to use JavaScript modules. So like exporting and importing JavaScript modules with the import keyword and the export keyword. It's still pretty new. I guess it's not that new, but it's new enough. I think what I'm gonna do though, because that would actually require me to write a server, maybe like a Node.js server, which I actually have, but I don't want to do that for this video because it's supposed to be like a simple project, and it's starting to get a little bit bigger, but I want to do it right. So I think what I'm gonna do instead is use something a little different, which you'll just see while I'm writing it, and I'll try to explain it as best I can as I go along, as usual. So let's go ahead and just get started. The first thing, I probably should have closed this. Got my OBS window open. The first thing that I want to say is, initially, in the very first video, I was talking about how it was great to keep stuff out of the global scope. So this is the main JS file. I'm keeping all of this out of the global scope by encapsulating it in a self-calling function that is anonymous. However, my classes and all my other files that I'm pulling in are defining constants in the global scope. So I want to avoid that. So how do I avoid that? The technique I'm going to use is just to define one constant global variable and essentially namespace my entire project within that global variable, or global constant rather, which is just going to be a JavaScript object. So it's going to be the same but slightly different, and we're going to actually have everything in the project inside of its own namespace, inside of its own scope. So that's pretty cool. So also, I think in this video I'm going to fix the pause feature, because I don't like how I implemented it. It doesn't really, like, you hit the P button when you let up on the key is when it pauses. I want it to be when you press down on the key, and to do that we're going to have game states. So there's going to be a state for running the game, there's going to be a state for pausing the game, there's going to be a state for the menu. There's just different states that you need in the game, so it's something we're going to have to do anyway. And before I get into all the different states and everything, I want a really good system for organizing all my code and keeping things just reasonable to manage and look at. So let's go ahead and get started here in the main JS file. So the first change is just going to be defining a constant. I'm just going to call it stay down because that's the name of the project, equals an object. And then we're going to do should I call it here? I shouldn't call it here. Function. So we're going to have an initialize function, and essentially this here is our initialize function because it's a self-calling function, and when this function is called, it basically pulls in all the other stuff that we've defined, and it kicks everything off. Like at the bottom of this function here, we set up the canvas, we add our listeners, we start our engine, and everything just kind of kicks off. So we already have this initialize function. We're just going to be moving everything into this named initialize function here and then calling it later on. So let's see, stay down constant. I'm going to have a couple different things in here, like constructors. So this is going to hold all of my constructors, and then let's see, what else do we got here. Let's not get ahead of ourselves too much, or myself. I guess I won't get ahead of myself too much. We'll start with that. We're going to try to move all of this stuff in here over time. Let's go ahead and just get the keyboard working for now. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in here to the controller. Now this is the great thing about this approach, because right now the controller JavaScript file is just an object in the global scope with the properties of the controller. But with the technique I'm going to use, I'm going to package everything to do with the controller into this file and then inject it into my globally scoped stay down object. And the way we do that is by not deleting our code first so we don't lose track of what we're actually doing. But we come in, we say stay down dot controller equals call this, pass in window. Now the reason I'm making a self-calling function here is because I'm only going to need to do this one time, and the function is going to return, is it going to return? It's not going to return anything. Controller equals function, yes, return okay. So instead of setting a global variable called controller equal to an object with these properties, we're going to return these properties in an object, and we're going to return that object inside of this controller. So stay down dot controller is going to be equal to this object. So we're setting that, but also the cool thing about this approach, because you're probably like, well, that's not any different at all. But the cool thing about this approach is now I can come inside and I could actually have like a private set of variables and stuff, variables and methods inside of that anonymous function. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. Come over to the listener function, or the handler function for the key down and key up events. Paste that in there. Function key down up, event, prevent default, everything's looking good. I just want to make sure. Let's see. This might be a problem here. Yeah, we're gonna have to change how this works just a little bit, but it's actually gonna be a little bit more structured, so that's probably good. And what you're basically gonna be watching me do in this video is rewrite all of this code in a way that is more modular. So if you already know how to do that and you're not interested, probably skip this video, but if not and you wanna learn how to better structure your application, this is probably gonna be a little boring to watch, and I'm not really gonna be doing too much cool stuff with the actual project and the game itself, but this is going to be important and it's going to factor into the success of the project overall, hopefully. That's my hope. So what I'm doing now is I am getting a reference to these, a private reference inside of this function. So nothing else in the application is going to have access to these variables because they're inside of this anonymous function scope. But when I return my controller object properties, I'm going to have some functions in here like get left, which is going to return left. So now I'm not going to be able to get or set my controller values, I guess, or my like the left value, the right value, the up value. I'm going to actually have getters and setters to access those and modify those. So it makes it a little bit more structured. Let's see, right there, up. Just got to get through this here. Get left. Get P, I guess. Okay, so that's a little bit different. The cool thing about this is now I don't have to say controller a bunch of times inside of this code. So that's pretty cool because I'm literally just setting these private properties inside of this function, which is pretty nice. Also, this key down up function is not accessible from anywhere else inside the application except for this scope right here. So this controller file, this controller.js file, this scope here has essentially private properties and variables and public properties and variables. Whatever I return here is going to get set in the controller object on my one global property, my one global variable, stay down, and I'm only going to have access to the stuff that I return here publicly. So that's pretty cool. Kind of making it a little bit more like a structured language. I guess with JavaScript it's pretty flexible. You can have structure if you want it, and you don't have to have it if you don't want it. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna break everything really bad. This is dumb, and I shouldn't do it this way. So I'm gonna go ahead and just get rid of this. And everything's gonna break anyway, so I'm gonna have to just fix it anyway. This is the other cool thing. I'm gonna take these out of my main file, and I'm gonna put them inside of the controller file. And I'm gonna put them in, let's see, activate. So the activate function on the controller object is going to add the event listener. So I'll be able to activate and deactivate rather than just calling window.addEventListener inside my initialization function. I'll be able to call activate, and then later when I don't want the controller to be listening, I'll just use deactivate. So say I move over to a menu screen rather than the game, and I don't want to listen to key presses anymore, and I want to listen to the mouse, I'll deactivate the controller for the keyboard, and I'll activate the controller for the mouse. So that's going to come in pretty handy. And I'll make that a public method by putting it into this returned object here, and everything should be working well. Come in here, come into stay down the main file. Let's see. Controller.activate. Another thing we're going to have to do is inside of the HTML file, and I know this is going to look like a huge mess, but hopefully by the end it's going to work and you'll see what I'm talking about and what I'm going for here. We have to first import the global object we're going to be using to namespace everything. So stay down.js, we're going to put that up here, and then inside of the script file in our body, all we're going to do is say stay down.initialize. And in order to not break everything, I'm gonna go ahead and comment out all this code here. See what we get. Nothing. Inspect. I'm sure we have some kind of problems. We don't have any problems yet. And actually the keyboard works, weirdly enough. So that simple. I just reformatted my controller file and my main file. So let me move this over here, go back to the main file. What we have is a global object called stay down, and we have an initialize function on it. Inside the HTML in the body, we're calling initialize. Put a semicolon on that just to be proper. Calling the initialize function. When we're pulling in these scripts, we're doing this in synchronous order. So we're pulling in a script. The first one we pull in is stay down.js, so we define our global object. We define the initialize function. The initialize function doesn't execute yet, so we can, inside of it, call other things that we haven't even yet loaded. So when this code is getting pulled in, this .controller hasn't even been set yet, and activate hasn't even been set yet. But because we're not calling initialize yet, it doesn't matter. So if I were to come in here and say stay down dot initialize and try to call it right there, that's going to throw an error. Can I read property activate of undefined? Well, undefined is controller, and we haven't defined controller yet, so obviously it's going to throw that error. So The reason this works is because first we're calling staydown.js, we're defining this, then we're pulling in controller.js, which sets staydown.controller equal to this object here, which is cool because it has all these private properties methods. Well, just one method, I guess, but has all this private stuff in it. It has all its own functions. We can pass in global objects if we want to, like for example window. We pass in window, it takes window as a parameter, and then we could use window inside of it. We don't need to do that, but we can, and I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna do it just because the examples I was looking at online do it, and it's actually good. From what I understand, like if you're gonna access document, for example, multiple times, it's slow to access document. But if you store document inside of a variable or hopefully a parameter, you have already accessed it and you're kind of like holding on to it. So in this scope, we're just holding on to the window locally here, and we can add and remove event listeners using that parameter that points to window. I don't know if it's going to be faster or not, but this is just what I'm doing. The design patterns I was looking at when I was deciding how to organize this all use this approach, so I'm just going to go with it. You should definitely do your own research and figure out what's best for your application. I'm going to look into it more, and maybe I'll change this in the future, but for now I'm just going to go with passing window in as a parameter. So this is really cool because we have our private stuff, we have our public stuff, and just like that we converted this file over, and now it's no longer in the global scope, it's inside of our stay down global object. So we only have one global object, and hopefully if we're gonna inject this into another application, say a website or something like that that has other games on the page, which I don't know why that would ever be the case, hopefully we don't have a name conflict with stay down. Just, I mean, I can call it stay down XYZ or something like that, and that's gonna reduce the chances of a name conflict. But hopefully we don't have a name conflict for this kind of thing where I'm just going to publish it on itch.io. We're almost certainly not going to have a name conflict. So let's go ahead and convert the rest of everything over and see if we can get this thing back up and running again. So the next thing I need to do is pull everything in from our old initializer, which defined a lot of functions, and see if we can get this thing to work. So let's do that. Where to start? Render function. Game states are going to hold the render function. So earlier I defined this property here on the stay down object called constructors. What I'm going to do is make a new folder, call it states, and this is going to hold our game states. Call it game states. New file, gamestate.js. I'm going to put all the different states, so like the pause state, the run state, the menu state, inside of this game states folder. But we're going to have a class for game state, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say stay down dot constructors dot game state equals function and we have to return whatever object we're doing here, but let's do inside here we're going to do const game state equals function update render. It's going to take the update and render functions, and then we're also going to do a prototype. So game state dot prototype equals just an object. For now I don't know what I'm going to put in it, but it's going to have a prototype. In the future I might throw some stuff in there, and then we're just going to return game state. So essentially this is a really good one to look at because we have all the code that we would have just inside this file if we were going to define it globally, but instead we wrap it inside of the self-calling function and we set it equal to some property on the global namespace object, stay down, and now we've just taken it out of the global scope, which is pretty cool. The other thing I like about this is if I were to, you can do this in one big object. Like I can have an object called x equals this, and then inside of this, constructors. And then inside of constructors, I could have game state. And that could be a function that takes update and render. And you can see how messy this is going to get. Like if I were to go multiple levels deep with this, and this was my entire game, you can put your entire game's code inside of one big object. And you can write it like this, but that would be extremely messy. This achieves the same thing essentially. We're creating this, but we don't have to write it that way. So basically we're creating a big nested set of objects, but instead of writing it that way and having to deal with that mess, we just do it this way, and it kind of builds it for us as we go. So it's just a neater way, or a way of keeping things neater as we write. So here's my game state. It's going to have two properties, this dot update equals update, and this dot render equals render. So I've got my two functions. Don't have a prototype. I don't need to do this, and that should work. Let's come back to the main file. Separate those out a little bit. Script source equals GameState.js, and then we're gonna actually add some game states. So the game states I'm gonna add are pause and run. Script source equals, we don't have those yet, but I'm gonna come into this folder here, and I'm gonna say, scroll down a bit, I'm gonna say new file, pause.js, and we're gonna do the same thing essentially. We're gonna say stay down, well, that's what we need to do, and let's do states. States.pause equals function. We're going to return an object, and then also over here we need to do, I don't think we don't, well yeah, we actually do need to do this because states isn't defined yet. So states, keep things alphabetical here. States, cool. Let's go back over here to game states, no, to pause.js, and we're going to return. And the cool thing about this is, where we don't even have to do it like that. We say function update, don't need a semicolon, function render. So the cool thing about this is when I'm writing my code, it's almost like I'm just writing out, I'm just writing it out like I would write it in the global scope, and all my private methods and properties I can just write really clearly, not in that big nested object kind of way, and not using this all the time. So I think that's really nice. And then when I go ahead and return, I'm just going to return a, how should I do this? Return a new game state. New game state, and yes, this isn't going to work yet, but it will work, because what I'm going to do is pass in stay down dot constructors dot game state, and as a parameter I'm going to take game state. So this is a really cool way of passing things into your kind of private little zone that you got going on here, because obviously we're not defining our classes anymore in the global scope. So I can't just access, for example, player. With this approach, I can access player from anywhere as long as I'm accessing it after I pull in the player script. So for example, engine, or, well, if I were to pull in let's do it in reverse. I can access rectangle in player. I can't access rectangle in any of these other files because rectangle hasn't been defined yet. But with this approach, what I can do, if I can find it again, it's not player, it's pause. What I can do is I can pass in things that I've defined on my global object as a parameter into this self-calling function, and then I could use them inside of the context of that function just like I would in the global scope. So that's pretty cool. So my code is still looking clean, everything's looking good. Let's see if we can actually get this to work. I'm gonna make another state called run. Run.js, pause and run, those are my two states so far. I'm basically just gonna copy the pause state, run, and then we're gonna do running. Save, and then the pause state, I'm gonna do paused. Refresh, it's not even gonna do anything because I haven't actually pulled anything in yet. So let's go ahead and pull in pause and run. Game states, pause.js. Run.js. Okay, so now I've got my game states pulled in. I've got my game state class. Where do we actually need to use this? Let's test it out. Let's test it out. Inside of initialize, after controller.activate, I'm going to say this dot states dot run dot update. Let's see if it works. It should get running. Nice. Okay, so it works. Now we have to figure out how to get all of this back into here, which is going to be a pain. It's going to take a really long time, but once it's done, I won't have to do it anymore, and then we can go forward. Luckily, I decided to do this when the project was still pretty small, so that's good. The cool thing now is we can just pull out big chunks like this. So this is the render function. Essentially, the game before only had one state, and it was the run state. So let's go over to run, and we're just going to go boom, paste our old render function in there. We're gonna come back over to, not game state, where is it? Stay down, there we go. Come back over here, pull the update function in. The other cool thing about this is, as you can see, I'm pulling out these large methods and I'm putting them into a separate file. So when I wanna modify something, and this is why I'm doing this, because when I wanna modify the run state and the update and render functions for the run state, I don't want to have to sift through all of those update and render functions and all my different states in one file. That's just going to be ridiculous. So I have a file for run, and I know that everything to do with run is inside of this file, and it still plays nice with all the other files, so it's pretty cool. What's not going to work is controller and player, but like we did with the game state, we can go ahead and pass those in once we get them figured out and defined. So let's go ahead and do function game state. How should I do this? Controller, player. This is another cool thing because at the top of your file you can see what you're actually using. So for this module, so to speak, I'm going to be using the controller, I'm going to be using the player, and I'm going to be using the game state class. So that's a pretty cool way of seeing like what's actually in here. And then at the bottom, what I'm going to have to do is pull those in. Undefined is not going to work for now. I'm just going to do that for player, and then stay down controller. Hopefully, and where this might get tricky is the order in which these scripts are pulled in. So the ones that obviously use a bunch of different things, that we're pulling a bunch of different things in, like the controller and the player, these are going to have to be defined at the end, most likely. And like controller doesn't really need anything passed into it. because it's kind of standalone like that, so that can stay at the top. Let's save that, come back over here, see what else we have over here. Inside a run, let's see if we can get run to actually do something. Let's see if we can get it to draw. How are we gonna do that? Update, if left, player.move left, and this is where we're gonna run some problems here. If controller dot that doesn't look right. That's not very intuitive language. If controller.get left and controller.get right. I like controller.left and controller.right better. So we're gonna have to figure out a way to get around that. Get up. Controller.get up. All right, cool. This is gonna break when I try to run it. Get left is not a function. That's not true. Where is controller? Controller, return, get left. Stay down.controller equals function window, return left. Get left, it's not a function. Stay down, game state. Where is the run? Okay, here's the run. Let's check this out. So we've got stay down. We've got controller. Engine is in there, but we're not really using it yet. So let's go ahead and comment this stuff out so we don't need to look at it. Pause and run are my game states. Controller is being defined. If I come over to controller, controller.getLeft is not a function. I guarantee that it is a function that I defined properly. I'm just not passing it in properly yet because I'm not used to this approach. Okay, so that definitely works. And it's a problem with how we're passing this in. So, oh, well, that's because I'm passing it in the wrong way. So once I get comfortable with this approach, this is going to go more smoothly, but until then, I'm going to run into some problems. And obviously, this approach is not super easy to troubleshoot, so definitely look into modules, like import and export, the import and export keywords. Okay, so now we're past that. We got controller in there, but gravity is not defined. Cool. So gravity is going to be part of our game. So inside of here, gravity equals 1. I think instead of doing it like this, I'm going to try to pull in as much as I can so I don't have to guess at what stuff is and rewrite everything. Stay down.js, world width, world height, gravity, friction. Copy all that stuff over. Save. Let's see what we get now. Player.update position is not a function. That's because we haven't converted player over yet. Let's convert player real quick. Is anything real quick? To do that, we're going to have to convert rectangle too. All right. So we can keep this the same and just put a wrapper around it. So let's do stay down dot constructors dot rectangle 2D equals That's the cool thing about this. Everything is the same, just like you would define it globally. You just define it inside of here, inside of this wrapper, and then you return rectangle 2D. And that should give us rectangle 2D. So that quickly, this file has been converted, and now I can avoid polluting global scope. Let's go ahead and do player as well. This is a bigger one, but no problem. Stay down dot constructors dot player. Did I do rectangle right? Rectangle 2D, yep. Stay down dot constructors dot player equals function copy all this stuff in. Yup, that should work. That'll work. Even object.assign is going to work. The only thing we have to do is make sure that we import staydown.constructors.rectangle2d. And we make sure we have a handle on rectangle2d in the parameters. Rectangle2d. Cool. So the function takes rectangle2d. This should all work. I'm going to save. I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to now only leave engine commented. Save, refresh. Feel myself getting in the groove. This is nice. Player.update position is not a thing. Okay, so player.update position is not a thing. Probably because we haven't actually imported player yet. So let's go down here. Instead of passing a empty object, we're going to do staydown dot. Do I just do player? That's not right. Is that right? This is another question. Do I want player to be a solo object? I don't want it to be a solo object. Staydown dot player is going to be its own thing. It's going to be kind of in the immediate scope with inside of staydown. So let's go over to staydown. I need to lower my camera down because normal hand motions are like down here, but all the hand motions I have to make are like up here, and this is weird. Feels weird to do. All right, let's see. Stay down, initialize, stay down, constructors, states. How am I gonna do this? Oh, I know how to do this. It's a constructor. Inside of initialize on stay down, I just need to do, probably before that, this dot player. Ooh, is this gonna work? It should work. I hope it works. This dot player equals new this dot constructors dot player, and I don't know what I have to pass in. Just a position probably. I don't think this is gonna work. This dot constructors dot player is not a constructor. Let's see if we can alert it though. Undefined. Okay, so what's the problem? If we come over here, rectangle gets defined first, player gets defined second, staydown.js is getting defined first up here. If I come over to player, staydown.constructors.player is equal to a function. It takes rectangle 2D. That's because I'm not returning it. Nice. Didn't finish my wrapper. Return player. I hope that works. That works. Okay, sweet. Can I read update position of undefined? Let's see what the problem is now. At least we know that this is working. So let's go back to staydown.js. We no longer have to alert this. We saw that alert. It contained the right stuff. Can I read update position of undefined at GameState.update at object.staydown.initialize? So in here, we're calling run.update. Save. Let's try it. Let's see if player is something. I'm hoping that that constructor worked properly. We get an object. Alert player dot. What's the problem function here? Update position. Let's see if we can actually get something. Okay, so we definitely have the update position function, so that's right. So I must be doing something wrong inside of the run game state. So let's go back to the run game state and see where we're calling that. Player.update position. I don't see what the problem is. Staydown.player, that's a thing of undefined, but for some reason is it undefined? Because initialize hasn't been called yet. This might be a problem because I don't know. Let's go back to player here. This might be a problem here. Let's go not to player, but to staydown.js. So I'm creating player here. How am I going to create player before I've actually gotten a hold of the constructor for player? That's interesting. I might have to define player in the game state. And honestly, why would player exist outside of the run state? Like, player shouldn't really exist inside or outside of the run state, right? Like, why would you have a handle on player when you're on the menu screen? So do I even need player to exist outside of the run state? That is a good question. And the answer that I'm going to tell myself, so I don't have to sit here and think about it on camera for the next 15 minutes, is, yeah, I'm just going to put it inside of the run game state. I'm going to take it out of here. And that makes sense too, because think about like your game objects, your main player. So I can see the benefit of having a handle on the main player, but then all your game objects, like the platforms that are going to be moving up, those are only going to exist inside the run state. There's no reason to have a handle on those when you're in the menu or when you're on the credits screen. Even in the pause state, you don't need a handle on those because you're not doing anything with them. You're not updating them. So this is probably the right approach here. So I'm going to say const player equals, and we'll get rid of that here as well. Const player is equal to, did I copy that? Nice. New, save, refresh. Can't read property player of undefined. This.constructors.player, and that's because we need to pass in player as a class. This could get messy too, but this is kind of nice because now we don't have to, like, look how nice and easy that is to write, and it makes perfect sense. The only problem is keeping track of this stuff. So let's go ahead and stay down dot constructors dot player. Yeah, I can see this getting very, very long when I have like 20 different classes that I have to fit in there, so that is probably going to change. I'm not sure how I'm going to approach that, but I'll figure it out later because right now we don't really have a lot going on. So Cloud top is not defined. We don't need collision functions outside of the run state. We might if we have two different types of run states, but I don't think we're going to have that for this game, and we could definitely find a way around that. Like, we can come over here on the stay down object and we can make something called collision methods. So then if we have multiple run states, we can just use collision methods to handle all that stuff. So, but for now, let's go ahead and take this out. Let's take ground out. Don't need player anymore because I'm getting him inside the run state. And let's see, rectangle 2D. Nope, that's the wrong one. Run.js. Player, ground, collide top, save, refresh. Everything is working, but nothing is rendering. And that's because we're not calling the render function. I don't think we're calling anything. And now is going to be something because we're going to have to redo the engine. So that's going to be a thing. Let's go ahead and get rid of the stuff we don't need. Game states, don't need it. Controller, don't need it. Don't even think we need run, but I'll keep it open. Don't need pause right now. Stay down. Can come here. Oh, well, one thing that I should definitely do is be able to draw. So let's go ahead and put this stuff in there. And this is something that I might want to define on the global scope, but for right now, I'm going to put it inside of run. And I realize that's a mess. I'm probably going to rename that later, or redo this later, set it to a constant. Const, I might as well just do it right now. It's never going to be set to anything else anyway. Ground isn't going to be set to anything else anyway. Okay, so we got that, and in order for this to work, we're going to have to pass in document. And I'm going to do my custom stuff later on in the parameters, and the stuff that already exists, like reserved keywords in JavaScript, I'm going to put first here. So let's do document. We're going to pass in document. And honestly, I don't even think I need to do that anymore, but I guess this is fine because I'm going to get a direct handle to the document element. Let's go back here and put this stuff at the end. Hey, and we are out of stuff to do. Cool. Let's go back to run, put this stuff at the bottom. Display.canvas.width equals world width, engine.setup, engine.start. This is no longer going to go in here. And display isn't going to stay inside of the run state. It's not a good way to do it, but for now we're going to do it that way, and I'll refactor that a little later on. Let's come back out here and do get rid of that. Setup. Okay, so we're going to have to redo some of this stuff here. So let's go ahead and redo the engine file. I'm going to put this entire thing inside of a wrapper. Stay down dot engine equals function. It's going to take window, copy all this over. That, I didn't like this when I wrote it. I didn't like that I had to do that. And this is going to be cool because I'm actually going to be able to get rid of that with this approach. But this is going to be a trick to rewrite. So let's go ahead and come back up here. So we no longer need this. So all this stuff is going to turn into variables. Running equals false. RF handle is going to be undefined. Update and render. Update and render are undefined. Accumulated time. I'm just going to retype these. Time step equals 1000 divided by 60. Function cycle takes timestamp. Window.request animation frame. Now that we don't have to worry about this anymore, we don't have to worry about this anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of all of the this everywhere and make this whole thing a lot more simple to look at, which is one of the other benefits of this approach. Elapsed time. What is elapsed time? I don't even need elapsed time. I'm literally defining it here to call it right there. And for some reason I have it prefixed with this, which doesn't even make sense. I just got this happy inside of here. So let's take timestamp minus current time. We're going to get rid of the elapsed time. It might come in handy later on if I do some like interpolation, but for now I don't need it, so I'm just going to get rid of it. Updated is false. RF handle. Accumulated time. Accumulated time equals time step. While accumulated time is greater or equal to time step. I'm just going through because I don't want to mess this up and then have something like an infinite loop or something like that. Better to be thorough, I suppose. Update. Update. I have that defined. Updated equals true. Accumulated time minus equals time step. If updated, then render. Start. Run equals true. REF handle equals window.requestAnimationFrame. And we no longer need start cycle at all. All we need now is cycle. And this is going to be, these are going to be our public methods. So all right, so these are our public methods: start, stop, and setup. Setup is now going to be set state. Get rid of this. This is going to cause a problem because obviously all of these are the same. So some people might hate this, but I'm just going to slap an underscore onto the end of that. You could also name it something else like state in for like state input or something like that. This is basically just a way to differentiate between the parameter state and the variable state, which I'm going to define up here as undefined. Var state equals. I'm not even going to put undefined. Okay, so and now update and render. We're not going to have update and render because remember on our states, update and render are going to be defined in there. So we have the update and render functions inside of our run state, and there's going to be the same thing inside of the pause state. So we're going to pass the state object itself to the engine, and state is going to be calling update and render. Okay. A lot of rewriting, definitely going to be errors. Still have some stuff to do. Running equals true. REF handle equals window.requestAnimationFrame cycle. Running equals false. REF handle. State equals state. For some reason I have too many of these. This I don't even need anymore. So that's nice because that was confusing to look at anyway. Why is all of this double indented? I don't like that. Oh, I think if I remember. Oh, that's not good. How the heck do you do it? I could have swore it was Control Alt, but I think I messed up my key bindings. I was gonna make it so I could just highlight a huge column. You can definitely do that with Visual Studio Code, but unfortunately I messed up my key bindings. I'm not going to go into that right now because that is not the goal. So I'm just going to go ahead and redo this. This is quality content right here, but you're getting the full experience of what it's like to program something and all of the mess ups and refactors. That was the whole idea. Hopefully this is the only major refactor we have to do, because if not, that would suck. All right, let's test it. Can it read property get context of null? This isn't even a problem with what we just did because obviously we haven't even pulled this in yet. Let's pull it in and break everything though before we even fix this one thing. First, let's try to fix this one thing, get context of null. So if I go into run, the only place I call get context is on the document element, get element by ID canvas, dot get context, document, element by ID canvas. That hasn't changed. I don't know why that's giving me a problem. So if we go back to run, let's alert document and see what we get. HTML document. Okay, alert document. Get element by ID. Canvas. Save. Null. Interesting. Oh, snap. The reason this is returning null is because I am importing the run script before I'm even putting my canvas on the screen. So that's a problem. In order to get around this, I'm gonna have to do what I should have done before, which is I can dynamically create the canvas and then append it. That might actually be better. So instead of getting that canvas, I'm going to create that canvas. Let's do create element canvas. Pen child. This is also probably not going to be permanent. I'm probably going to move this stuff up to some other thing so I don't have to do this. Append it, save it. HTML, do I even get a handle on the canvas in CSS? I do not. So now I'm going to get rid of this. Save it, see what we get. Pen child of null. How is that null? Let's go into run, see what we did wrong. Body isn't defined yet either. Okay, that is a problem. Dang it. Didn't want to have to do this yet. But you know what? That's fine. We were going to have to do it at some point anyway, so let's go back out here and just do display. And display is going to be display is just going to be undefined for now. Really don't even have to put it up there, but I will. And then down here, this dot display equals, and we'll pull this out of run. We'll pull this out. Display is not going to be equal to this at all. I'm going to come back over here, set that equal to this. Get element by ID canvas. You know what? I'm still going to create it because I think that's a little bit more classy anyway. So display is going to be equal to document.createElement canvas.getContext2D. Alpha is false. Document body append child display.canvas. We can do that in the initialize function because we're calling it after everything's already been created. Save. Canvas is no longer going to have an ID. And now inside of run, I'm going to pass in display. I don't know if you guys can hear that lawnmower, but it's there. Stay down dot display. Display controller. Canvas undefined. Display is undefined, so we're passing it in wrong. So I've got document, then display, stay down dot display, stay down. Oh, because I'm passing it in afterwards. It kind of has to be defined up here. Okay. We can't create display in Initialize because we're trying to use it inside of this. So we need to actually pass a value to this when... Oh, you know how we can get around this? I know how we can get around this. This.display equals... There we go, simple. I just had to move it up a little bit. Display, we're going to create it, and then down here we're going to append it. This. Cool. Rendering context 2D. We have the canvas. It is sized appropriately. Update's not defined at object.staydown.initialize. Update is not defined. Oh, that's because engine isn't properly set up. So now everything seems to work, except engine still needs to be handled properly. So we're gonna do engine.setup is gonna take a state. And I think I did set state. This.states.run engine.start. Let's see if it works. It works. Okay, sweet. All right, so now everything is refactored. I think I might have missed something, but we'll catch it. We'll run into it. P doesn't work. Pause doesn't work at all. So now that we've refactored everything, finally, I don't know how far into the video we are, like an hour and 15 minutes. My throat is getting sore from talking so long. Man, now we can finally fix the pause feature and be done. And hopefully in the next video we actually do something cool. So let's try to get to that pause feature real quick, and then we'll do something cool in the next video. All right, so the pause feature, we're not gonna have a render. It doesn't matter because the canvas is on the screen anyway, so you'll just see the paused game, just won't be drawing anymore. So when we hit pause, we have to listen for this inside a run actually. So let's go to the update function here. If controller.getP, that's not even a function. Do I need a handle on the engine in here? Yes, I do. Document, display, controller, engine. Document, display, controller, engine. Document, display, controller. Pass that in. If controller.getP. Engine.set state. Oh my gosh, now I need a handle on the states. Jeez. Let's do controller engine states. Controller engine and like I said, we're gonna figure out a better way to do that, hopefully, because that is getting messy real quick. It's gonna get messy inside of the bigger game states that handle a lot of stuff. So probably gonna figure out a way to fix that before the next video, hopefully. States, now we have states. Rectangle.getBottom. Nope. Let's go down here. Engine.setState. States.pause. And we're gonna have to go over to controller. Controller P. Get P is a thing. Save. Refresh. We alert that. We're gonna stop that. Paused. We can't unpause, but we did pause, which is cool. All right. Let me get rid of that alert, wherever that alert is. Is it in here? Where is that alert coming from? Is it in run? Yeah, okay. Get rid of that. This way that doesn't happen every time we refresh. Let's go over to controller. P equals, that's stupid. So now we can do this. We can just set P equal to state, so when we press P, it's an instant pause, which is awesome. And now we're going to do the same thing in the pause state. So let's go to the run state. We're going to copy this out of the pause state. If controller.getP, I'm going to rename that some point to copy. Go over to the pause state. Console.log paused. We can keep that. If controller.getP engine.setState. States.run. Also, we have to pass in states, comma game state, stay down.states. Of course, what we could also do is hand in just the run state. We could say, if we don't want this to have access to all of the states, we could just do states.run, which is pretty cool. So this scope now only has access to the run state, which I think that this whole modular thing is just really cool. It looks a little bit complicated, especially if you've never used it. I looked at several articles and I had to reread them several times before I was like, okay, well, this makes perfect sense. But it makes pretty good sense, and I'm hoping, because I've never used this before, I'm hoping that this is actually a good approach and it's easy to maintain. Just from refactoring things today, I can already tell that this is going to be a problem. The parameters list for things is going to get stupid sometimes, so I'm going to figure that out. But other than that, I really like the way stuff is laid out. Like, for example, the engine. This is great. Like, I don't need this. This keyword is gone. Everything is just as if it were to be written in the global scope, except it's in its own scope, which is cool. And I like the approach. Anyway, let's see if what I did with pause works. So, controller is not defined. I forgot to pull it in. Okay, so there we go. Controller. Stay down.controller, refresh. Oof, engine is not defined. Game state.update. What is even happening? Go back to pause. Well, we didn't pull an engine either. So controller, engine, stay down dot. And you could just as easily do this without parameters. At the top, you can come in here, and essentially what I'm doing, you could say var engine equals stay down dot engine. It's the same exact thing. It's the same exact thing. The only difference is I'm doing it with parameters and passing these values into the parameters of the function, self-calling function. But you could just as easily do this at the top, and that might actually be a little bit easier to read. So we'll see. Like I said, I'm gonna figure something out for this, because this is just gonna be stupid to maintain. I'm gonna be spending multiple minutes trying to figure out how to fix that. Okay, so still update of undefined. I'm still getting a problem with pause. Can it read property update of undefined? Okay, so this is no longer a problem with pause. This is a problem with the run state inside of engine. States.run. Is states.run not defined here? Oh, dang. You know what? I bet it's not. And I bet even if I try to do states, it would be a problem. And the reason it's a problem is because over here, we're defining pause before we're defining run. So pause has, wait a minute. Pause doesn't have access to run, but run has access to pause. That's not good. Let's go back over here. Again, I'm pretty sure JavaScript modules with import and export, those keywords, would fix this problem. But we're not using that for the time being. Even if I were to do this, states, that's still going to be a problem. Wait a minute, how is that not a problem? I don't think I like that. I don't like that. It works. The reason it works, if I were to come right here and do states.run, I'm going to get undefined. But because these are functions and I'm passing in the states object, run does get defined inside the states object later on. This is going to have to be, this is the way it's going to have to be, but I still don't really like that. Hopefully you guys caught that. What's going on is I define states so I can pass in the states object even though run hasn't been defined on it yet. And inside of the functions, it's going to work because these functions are called after run gets defined. So I guess it's really not a problem, but I don't like that too much. We'll see what we can do about that. Hopefully I don't have to refactor everything into using JavaScript modules, but if I do have to do that, at least I'll learn about JavaScript modules. Let's see. Let's make it so that pause can actually, because right now what's happening is it's switching between the two states really fast because I'm not actually setting P to false after I press it. So if I come in here to controller, set P, P equals P, and then inside of pause we'll do set state and set P false. We'll do the same thing inside of the run state, and then we can be done finally. All right, so P controller.set P false, set state, state.pause, and here we're going to just return, because we don't want anything else to run after we pause. We're just pausing the game at the start of the loop. Want to give the player as much precision with the pause button as possible. Don't want them to hit it and then it still executes the cycle of the game. Let's go back to pause. After we hit P, we're going to return. Don't need to return because the function just closes, but I might add something in there later. So cool. Ooh, that's weird. That is weird. I don't really care for that. We're gonna have to fix that. When I hold P down, it resets it to true. There is a way to fix this, and that's gonna be another video that we do on perfecting the controller object a little bit. For now, this works pretty well. I can press P. I can even hold it down. If I hold it down too long, it's gonna switch between the states. So as you can see, I'm running at like half speed. Like this is normal speed, but then I can half speed it because it's switching between states every frame. I'm just holding the pause button down. So anyway, this has been a very long video. Did not intend for it to be this long, but I refactored all the files in the project and I introduced game states. We can switch between game states. We can pause. Pause works better doesn't work perfectly, but that's not the problem with the logic with pause. It's a problem with the logic of the controller and how we are setting our key values to true and false when a key is pressed. So I'm gonna go ahead and call this one done. I'm gonna wrap this up. I hope you guys learned something. If you stayed this long, congratulations, that's ridiculous. It's a very long video. Comment and have a great day. I am out of here. Let's go ahead and stop recording. Peace out.